This is the story of the crime of the century, the Great Brink's Robbery. The target of this crime was the Brink's building. The building stood at 165 Prince Street in Boston's North End. It was a three-story red brick warehouse-style structure, relatively unassuming on the outside. Why was this building a target? Brink's, Incorporated, founded in the 1850s as a parcel and valuables delivery service, had established it as their Boston headquarters in 1947, only 3 years before the robbery. The building was considered a fortress of security, reinforced steel doors, multiple locks, a network of alarm systems, and armed guards stationed on site. Brink's promoted itself as one of the most secure cash handling facilities in the country. Now, let us go back in time. The stage is set to execute this perfected robbery on January 17, 1950 at Boston's North End. Snow curls in the air, dancing under the flicker of street lamps. The streets smell faintly of coal smoke and winter damp. Inside a squat, red brick building at 165 Prince Street, the night-counting crew at Brink's finishes up. The room hums with the rustle of bills and the faint metallic clink of coin. At 7:10 p.m., footsteps approach the side door. A key, the illegally fitted right key it seems, slides into the lock. The tumblers fall into place like dominoes. The door swings open to reveal 7 men in navy pea coats and chauffeur caps. Their faces are grotesque rubber masks. In less than 30 minutes, they will take $2.775 million. And for the next 6 years, they will live as ghosts, until betrayal shatters the silence. The seeds of the Great Brink's Robbery were planted 3 years earlier by a man named Anthony Fats Pino. Pino wasn't a violent stick-up man, he was a planner, a strategist. Short, round-faced, with a deceptively easy smile, he had a reputation for pulling off burglaries that seemed impossible. In 1947, Brink's moved to its new fortress on Prince Street. High walls, steel doors, alarm systems, and armed guards, it was the crown jewel of Boston's secure facilities. To most criminals, it was untouchable. But to Pino, it was an irresistible puzzle. He began assembling a crew. Joseph Specs O'Keefe, a sharp-eyed thief with a temper and a gambling habit. Stanley Gushora, Pino's trusted driver and safe man. Adolph Jazz Maffei, charming, connected to Boston's underworld. Michael Geegan, quiet, methodical, and steady under pressure. James Faherty, quick on his feet, unflappable in chaos. Thomas Sandy Richardson, ex-con, reliable, kept his head down. Vincent Coster, the rooftop lookout. Henry Baker, blended into any crowd. And the elusive Joseph Banfield, who would handle escape driving. For months, the Brink's building became their obsession. They studied guard routines from a distance, watching the comings and goings in all weather. Coster took up posts on nearby rooftops, counting the minutes between guard changes. He noted when deliveries arrived, when the counting room lights went on, and, most importantly, when the side door was unlocked. One by one, they stole the lock cylinders from Brink's doors. It was risky, the locks had to be removed, duplicated, and put back before morning. But they pulled it off flawlessly, until they had keys for every door in the building. Then they broke into the offices of the Brink's Alarm Company, to copy schematics of the system protecting the vault. Pino's plan evolved. Originally, it was planned to be a burglary. But the vault's alarm was armed whenever it was closed. That meant they would have to strike while it was open, which was only during business hours. That changed everything. Now, it would be an armed robbery. They rehearsed the robbery like actors perfecting a scene. The crew borrowed stolen cars and trucks, driving the exact route they would take on the night. They learned where to park, where to idle with lights off, and how to melt into traffic without drawing attention. Coster's rooftop signals became gospel. 1 flashlight beam meant, go. 2 meant, abort. They practiced entering in silence, moving through the building quickly, bagging loot, and leaving without leaving a trace. 6 times, they came close to doing it for real. 6 times, Coster's signal told them to turn back. One time, it was because a delivery truck had pulled up unexpectedly. Another time, a guard lingered too long by the side door. Each aborted attempt made them hungrier, but also more disciplined. January 17, 1950. At 6:30 p.m., they gathered in Roxbury. The air in the room was thick, not with nerves, but with focus. They dressed in their uniforms, navy pea coats, chauffeur caps, gloves, and those eerie rubber masks. They loaded pistols, revolvers, and a sawed-off shotgun. The stolen green Ford truck rumbled toward the north end. At 7:10 p.m., they walked to the side door. The key worked flawlessly. Inside, 5 employees were in the counting room. The robbers found out like they'd rehearsed. Richardson secured the door. Baker and Faherty covered the staff. O'Keefe and Maffey began filling the canvas sacks. Pino directed each step. They bound the employees with rope and gagged them with tape. One guard was forced to lie face down on the floor. The vault door stood open. In minutes, $1.218 million in cash and $1.557 million in checks, money orders, and securities were bagged. They ignored the heavy silver, which would be too cumbersome to deal with. At 7:37 p.m., they were gone like smoke. The crew drove to a safe location. The loot was divided into identical bags, to be hidden until the statute of limitations ran out. That meant they would wait out the full 6 years. The stolen truck was dismantled and burned. Masks and gloves were cut up and dumped in multiple locations. The police arrived at the crime scene to find almost nothing: a chauffeur's cap, scraps of tape and rope. It was as if the robbers had vanished into thin air. For the FBI, it was a nightmare. They questioned Boston's underworld informants. They shadowed known burglars. They raided hideouts looking for a single misplaced dollar from the loot. Nothing. Months slowly turned into years. The crew had sworn an oath: no flashy spending, no sudden lifestyle changes. They lived modestly, keeping their day jobs, avoiding the clubs, the racetracks, the bars where tips were traded for free drinks. The stolen cash sat hidden in attics, walls, and storage sheds. Checks and securities were destroyed since they were too risky to cash. But under the calm surface, cracks began to form. O'Keefe was the first to strain under the weight of secrecy. He gambled heavily, drifted into debt, and grew paranoid that the others might try to cut him out of his share. In 1954, O'Keefe was arrested in Pennsylvania on armed robbery charges. In prison, he wrote angry letters to Pino, demanding money for legal fees. His tone turned threatening. The crew began to fear he might talk. By 1955, the tension between O'Keefe and the others had become dangerous. One night, Vincent Coster and Henry Baker drove to Pennsylvania, lured O'Keefe into a car, and took him to a wooded area. Multiple shots were fired. O'Keefe was wounded but escaped, staggering to a farmhouse where police were called. Bleeding and furious, O'Keefe decided the code of silence was over. From his hospital bed, he began talking to the FBI. At first, it was only fragments, names here, times there. But soon, he gave them the entire structure of the plan, the rehearsals, the night of the heist, and every man involved. The statute of limitations was about to expire in a matter of a few days. The FBI and Boston police moved very fast. On January 12, 1956, just 5 days before the 6-year deadline, they arrested 8 men in coordinated raids across Boston. The trial became a spectacle, Boston's crime drama of the decade. In the courtroom, O'Keefe sat on the witness stand for days, coolly recounting the planning, naming names, and describing how they carried millions past the stunned Brink's employees. The defense tried to paint him as a liar and a bitter man seeking revenge. But the jury believed him hook, line and sinker. On October 9, 1956, All 8 men were convicted and given life sentences, plus additional years. But there was still one problem: most of the money was still missing. O'Keefe had claimed he buried his share in a shed in Stoughton, Massachusetts. Investigators found only $57,000, a fraction of the total. Rumors swirled. Some said the rest was hidden in the walls of North End tenements. Others believed it had been laundered through gambling operations. And some whispered it was buried so well that it's still waiting for someone to find it. By the time the robbers walked free, decades later, most of them were old men. Pino died in 1973. Others faded quietly into obscurity. O'Keefe, the man who broke the silence, lived out his years far from Boston, granting rare interviews about the night that made history. The Great Brink's Robbery remains one of America's most famous unsolved puzzles, not because we don't know who did it, but because we may never know where the money went. In the winter air of Boston's North End, people still point to the old Brink's building and say, that's where they pulled off the crime of the century. The Great Brink's Robbery was planned with precision, rehearsed like a military operation, and executed in silence. It stood as the perfect crime, until faced with man's fallibility embodied in human weakness, greed, and betrayal which brought it all crashing down. But despite the arrests, despite the trials, and despite decades of speculation, the greatest mystery still lingers. Where did the missing millions go? Was it spent quietly, dollar by dollar, hidden in plain sight? Is it still buried in walls, waiting to be found by accident? Or did it vanish forever, lost to time and death, carried to the grave by men who never spoke again? The answers may never come. But the legend of the Great Brink's Robbery endures, not just as a crime, but as a story of ambition, discipline, and the downfall of man's fallible trust. Out of $2.77 million stolen, less than $58,000 recovered. The rest, still missing. What do you think happened to the missing millions? Drop your theory in the comments below.